So between the president ramping up immigration enforcement and the Supreme Court saying essentially, go ahead, that's just fine, it's been a stomach-turning September so far. So selfishly, I was glad when it was time to prepare another episode of Faithful Resistance so I could talk to some people who live and breathe the immigration battle and have good ideas about what you and I can do to get involved. After all, there may be a little visceral pleasure when I yell at the TV, but swearing is hardly a strategy to make things better. So we're talking to two people steeped in immigration. One is a staffer at the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, where they're very busy these days. But first, here's a conversation I just had with Whitney Duncan, who's a professor of anthropology at the University of Northern Colorado. We haven't had an interview with an academic on the subject of immigration before, so I'm really excited for this conversation with Whitney Duncan from UNC. Thanks for taking the time very much. I see on your website, or the school website, it says you are a medical and psychological anthropologist. So how'd that get you to immigration and immigrants?
That is a great question. So my research began many years ago with the question of how migration emotionally impacts people in communities where a ton of people emigrate, but not all of them do. And so, what are the emotional impacts for those who, quote unquote, stay behind, specifically in rural Mexico? So, as a medical and psychological anthropologist, my questions were around the sort of cultural shaping of emotional experience and how social processes like migration or economic distress or other, sociopolitical situations impact emotion and what people do about it when they experience emotional distress. So that led me into research around Mexico's mental health system, and that was the basis of my first book. So migration was a big piece of the story, but wasn't the whole story. And since that book came out, I've really shifted my work to be on immigrant health, specifically in the United States and in Colorado, which has then linked me into the whole immigrant advocacy network, and it's all connected.
Yeah. I can't imagine how difficult the situation, especially the current situation, is on an immigrant's mental health. Would you talk a little bit about what you see in your part of the world?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I might get choked up myself. It's been an incredibly difficult few months. So I've mostly been working with folks in our local Colorado communities in Denver, primarily, but also other areas in the Front Range. And I can't overstate the emotional and mental health impacts of this increased enforcement and terror that immigrants are being subjected to. And that is for people who have been directly impacted, as in they or their family members have been assaulted, abducted, detained, deported, but also for those who have not been wrapped up in the system, but who fear being wrapped up in the system. And so it's a sense of really pervasive and unremitting stress and worry and fear that impacts really every aspect of life, and decisions around whether to send one's kids to school, whether to seek medical care, whether to go to work, and then leaves people often with very few options. And the stress of all that, I mean, it's like a toxic stress effect that seems to be happening, and that worries me for, what the impacts are going to be for generations, really.
When I hear you say that, I think about all the news shows that I watch on television with panels of people. And at this point in a panel, if you were saying that, one of the right people on the right would say, well, it's their own fault because they shouldn't have come here to begin with. It seems like there's so little compassion from the right now about these people. And I mean, that just adds another layer to the distress. I mean, is this what you find as well?
I completely agree. And the way in which the immigrant and migrant community has been maligned and blamed for our social problems is such a violent affront to everyone that I know who is an immigrant or who has immigrant family members, who see themselves as having done everything possible to go about things, the right way, to be law abiding, who are really coming here either because they are fleeing persecution, they are fleeing violence, or they are fleeing economic desperation. All of these are, you know, refugees essentially from different factors, right? And so to be maligned and publicly represented as criminals is extremely, it's not just offensive. It, like, I think really harms the sort of moral fabric of our society and erodes any sense of belonging that might have been established for people. So it's extremely destructive, and it's extremely hypocritical coming from those, who claim to, for example, be Christian, right? And who would welcome the stranger who is in distress. To have a whole narrative that maligns immigrants is directly contrary to the belief systems that many who are saying those things, claim to espouse.
But I do wonder sometimes what you say, or what I should say to someone who says it's really as simple as they shouldn't have come here, they came here the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, it seems like that's where the discussion ends. Have you found a way to make that discussion more meaningful and be more compassionate about what they're saying, and get them to be more compassionate of what, you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I think I haven't perfected the art of this sort of elevator pitch about this. For me, as an educator, that's where I love the opportunity to do things like the Immigration 101 event that I gave at the church, because it allowed me to really show the background of our immigration system and the ways in which there are not actually legal ways for most of the world's population to come to the United States with documents. So for people to understand just the basic system and how it works, and how there is no way for that human movement to be legally facilitated. There's no line to get in for most people in the world. And yet there are millions of people in the world who are fleeing those circumstances that I just mentioned, whether it's political persecution, socioeconomic distress or desperation, violence, et cetera. And the United States is a place that the global population has historically seen as a place of refuge, because we have had a pretty supportive asylum infrastructure. Now that's being eroded. So for us to go from a country that welcomes people who are fleeing violence and persecution, to a country that is rejecting people in those situations is a very distressing place to be. But I think, to answer your question more directly, it's having deeper conversations with people where the impact happens. Most of my students who come into the classroom have never heard really anything about how the immigration system works, don't understand what the policies have been or how we got here. And so having those conversations, I think, allows people to open their minds a little bit to an understanding of what the circumstances people are facing is, and what the legal system looks like. Also important to mention, I think, is the way in which many of the people that are being currently maligned actually did come with inspection to the United States, and they were given what was called parole by the Biden administration. It's many of those people that I'm seeing getting detained and deported right now. So they are mostly in asylum proceedings. They have a legal immigration case that they are following through with, and yet are being treated like they are violent criminals. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lack of understanding of how the immigration system works, and there's a lot of opportunity for fruitful conversations where we can, deepen the community's understanding of how things work and how things don't work.
I wonder if there's anything that's going on right now that gives you any hope that those conversations might occur on a widespread basis, or let's just end the question right there. What gives you hope? Any kind of hope?
I think what gives me hope is the thriving immigrant advocacy community that we have in Colorado. The interest that I've seen from my community in Golden, from various communities of faith, individuals who have never been necessarily involved in or educated about the immigration system coming forward and saying, like, teach me what I need to know. I want to give the Immigration 101 presentation. I want to be able to have these conversations with my family. And that gives me hope that, it may be a slow process and we are up against huge odds. But the community is extremely resilient. And I see more and more people coming forward to get involved, to get educated, to really fight against what I see as a very serious erosion of not just immigrant rights, but all of our rights that are being trampled on as the protections for immigrants are being eroded.
Say just a little bit more about how that erodes our rights as citizens.
Well, for example, the question of due process, of someone having the legal right to see their legal case through the system, that is being eroded when someone is detained without reason, which is the case for many people that I know who have been detained. They were detained due to no fault of their own. They were not even engaged in a traffic violation. They're being racially profiled, rounded up, sent to detention centers where they're not able to consult with legal counsel and not able to have regular contact with their families. As you've seen in the news, been deported to countries that they have no connection to, with, again, no ability to have legal representation. If that can happen to immigrants, that can happen to anyone. And we've seen cases of citizens and legal permanent residents also being picked up and treated in this manner. From my perspective, it's sort of a test case that if the Trump administration sees they can get away with these types of infractions for immigrants and no one fights against it, then I think that it can happen to anyone who speaks out against them, whose opinions they disagree with, who they would like to silence. And I find that extremely concerning, the way that it helps us slip into basically an authoritarian state, and the way that ICE is basically creating a paramilitary for the United States, ostensibly to deal with the migration problem. But ICE has really no compunction around who they detain and what they do. There's very little oversight, and it's extremely concerning. And, I think I don't need to, argue for why we need to care about immigrant rights, but one reason that we should care is that it's not just immigrant rights, it's all of our rights. It's all of our well-being. It's the very fabric of our communities.
Thank you. Thank you for making it so that we can all understand it and know how it affects all of us. And it should be enough to just care about the immigrants, but sometimes it takes a little bit more, and knowing it affects us too probably makes a difference. So thank you very much. Good luck with all your efforts in your Immigration 101. I think you'll be in demand. I'm sure you are in demand. Okay. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Yes, nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Boy, is she smart. We've already invited her to come back again. And now we'll hear from Paula Grimaldo at the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, who has some excellent ideas about ways to get involved. We're so glad to speak with Paula Grimaldo from CIRC, the highly respected and very busy Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. Thanks for being here. And I want to begin with the basics, if you don't mind, just to tell me what CIRC is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. CIRC is a membership-led organization. We're actually comprised of over 70 plus organizations from around the state of Colorado. We have small grassroots members who are just volunteers, and then some of our larger members, they're nonprofits like the ACLU, and we do have members from all across the state of Colorado. CIRC in itself, we are an advocacy organization, and we really pride ourselves on being able to change policy at the local as well as the state level so that Colorado is a more welcoming place for immigrants and their families.
I mentioned to you before we began the actual interview that your vision statement on your website says CIRC believes in the inherent dignity and human right of every person, regardless of immigration status. And that's inherent worth and dignity is one of our bedrock values, too, at the Unitarian Universalist Church where I go and which does this podcast. So I think we're on the same wavelength. And boy, do you have a lot of work to do to advance this right now. I saw this list of goals that CIRC has on the website. Oh, so many things. And I was wondering if you would just address a little bit about what you do on each of these goals and maybe how people can get involved, because you're the membership engagement coordinator. Is that right?
Manager.
Manager.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
sure.
I'm
Okay.
happy to speak on that.
So if number one on the list is advocate for immigrant rights. What do you do?
Yeah, all kinds of things, really. I mentioned earlier about how we're a membership-led organization. And so what that means is that our members essentially get to drive our work and get to determine what CIRC spends time prioritizing during the year, since there's so much, right? And so some of the things that you see there, like we have specific direction from our members on what we're advocating for year by year. So when it comes to advocacy, right now, one of our biggest focuses is our Keeping Families Together campaign. This campaign is a campaign that really focuses at the legislature, making sure that no damaging bills come through our state legislature, right? We all have maybe heard of the Show Me Your Papers law that Colorado used to have back in the early 2000s. So making sure that damaging legislation doesn't pass through once again, and also advocating and playing more of a defensive line at the state capitol, making sure that we get to keep programs like OmniSalud, which provides health care for thousands of immigrant Coloradans. Keep what is the other one called? Cover All Coloradans. And then we have other pieces of legislation, like the one that just passed, which is SB 276, concerning the civil rights of all Coloradans, but especially immigrants, which is a bill that reestablishes our stance as Coloradans, that we want to protect data privacy of all individuals in Colorado, but also immigrants. That schools and public places need to have a policy for how to deal with ICE if they ever come knocking at your door. How state agencies need to handle requests for information from federal agencies, and more. I'm happy to share a little bit more about that. But on the advocacy side, we do a lot at the state legislature, but we also do some work around at the local city council levels as well. One of our more recent efforts at the city council level deals with the flock cameras that are being used in Denver. We have come to note that ICE is using the data from these flock cameras, and so we've led a little bit of an effort to try to get them turned off in the city of Denver.
Can volunteers help do this advocacy work? Can they be trained to help you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say our members take more of a key in like driving the campaign, but SB 276 would not have been passed without the support of everybody. For folks that are interested, organizations that are interested in joining our membership as well, you get to have a vote, right? You have a seat at the table. You also get to form part of our steering committees, which are led by directly impacted Coloradans. For the flock cameras and some of the work that is more so related in that sense, I would say keep a close eye on our social media, because sometimes we'll post calls to action for this work.
Another goal comes up: empowering the immigrant community. Boy, is that a tall order these days. Can you give me an example of what you're doing to try to empower immigrants?
Yeah, absolutely. That is actually that is like the bedrock of our work. That is something that we really pride ourselves in. We want to make sure that we are not doing the work for communities, right? We are leading alongside communities, that we are centering the voices of directly impacted immigrants who are at the forefront of this fight. And so we're really there to lend a helping hand as the immigrants push for policy change, for better conditions. And so we do that through our membership model. And so I mentioned a little bit about the membership. A lot of these groups that are member organizations, they get to step into spaces where maybe they haven't stepped into before, right? At the state legislature, they also get to form part of our board of directors, steering committees. And so we are really able to elevate their responsibility and take matters into their own hands when it comes to finding a solution to all of these problems. And so we really, yeah, we follow this close leadership development model through our membership, um, and through the advocacy efforts that we lead.
We just did an interview that is playing in this podcast too with an anthropologist up in Greeley at UNC who's highly involved in the immigrant community, and she says immigrants are having, I mean, this is not news to anybody, the absolutely most difficult, stressful, negative, horrible time right now, being called criminals, all the things that we've seen. I know you work with immigrants and immigrant communities too, and what do you see? How are they even able to function sometimes day to day right now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a terrible time right now. It's very difficult to be present in this work as a directly impacted immigrant myself. And I see a lot of fear in the communities. People are scared to take their kids to school. People are scared to go to work. And right now, I think what's really been helping is being able to connect as a community, to have this wide network of people that care across the state. Colorado's in one of the best positions, I would say. We have some of the strongest protections for immigrants, and that is because people who were affected by anti-immigrant legislation and conditions in Colorado in the early 2000s raised their voice and use their stories to create this positive change that we now see in Colorado, where we are not in the worst position per se, but it is still a very scary time to be an immigrant. And so definitely want to uplift the fact that, yeah, it's a difficult time and it's super important to find community right now to support one another in this fight.
I see another goal is to increase public awareness about the social and economic contributions of immigrants. I think we're getting a little bit more information about that now because of job market effects and job numbers and unemployment and things. But what are you doing to let people know what an integral part of a healthy economy the immigrant community can be?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an important position to take, right? As we want to show the value of our community. I want to highlight first that immigrants are not just the fruits of their labor. They're not just labor, right? They're valuable because they are people and human beings and brothers and sisters to all of us and siblings. But yes, we have a very lasting impact on the economy. As you could see, a lot of farm workers across the country are coming out to say, hey, I disagree with this policy because immigrants run their farms. Immigrants keep that side of the economy going. When it comes to construction, the hospitality industry, restaurants, from everything from head to toe is being impacted right now. And I think we could see that, right? I think it was the latest jobs market report that reported that we are severely doing much worse than this time around last year with, I think it was like 22,000 new jobs created versus however many we had last year. I think the current policy on immigration is affecting the workforce itself and then the sentiment that people have coming into the United States. So we're seeing a lot of the tourist industry also taking a big hit because of these anti-immigrant policies.
So in your job as membership engagement manager, what would you suggest to a person who's watching this and says, finally, I want to help, I'm going to do something? What would they do? How could they get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to talk to you all about the Colorado Rapid Response Network. CIRC is a part of that network, and if you all haven't heard about it, it's a network that we have in order to support the immigrant community during this time. It was actually established back in 2017, and it's a direct line that folks can call if they see ongoing activity or if they have family members or friends who have been impacted or are interacting with the immigration system. You're going to get two options when you call the number, and I could pull it up for us here just shortly. But option one is going to be for activity that is happening right now. So what we do is we are able to send confirmers out to the site of an incident so that they can confirm whether or not it's immigration and customs enforcement. Reason being, if it's not them, if it's just our local police, we don't want to drive that fear. We don't want rumors to spread across social media and impact people's day-to-day life. But if it is a real incident, we also want to make sure to document what is happening in real time on the ground. Now, option two is going to be for incidents that have already happened, whether somebody's loved one got picked up by ICE, whether someone has a court hearing, etc., and wants a little bit more support. We're able to connect these folks to what we call our docu team, who can connect a family to resources, document the case to identify to see if there's been any human rights abuses, any broken laws, etc. And we can support that family in whatever way they would like to fight for their case. So I would say getting involved with the Colorado Rapid Response Network is very crucial right now. This is a volunteer-led effort, and so we're always looking for volunteers who can be confirmers, go to the site of an incident, especially if you're a person with a little bit more privilege with the immigrant, who is a citizen, right? And also for the docu team, we need people to support families as they're interacting with the immigration system. It's a very complex and intimidating system. Through the rapid response line as well. We also have Court Watch. We know that a lot of people are getting called to court and being picked up there. And so we do have a network of volunteers who is able to stand outside of the courthouse, accompany people to make sure that they're not getting picked up, and deliver them safely to their home.
Okay.
Other ways to get involved, like with CIRC itself, we have Know Your Rights, train the trainer models that where we're able to teach people how to give trainings on people's constitutional rights. So we are aiming to have one of these virtually every single month. So if you keep a close eye on our social media, you'll be able to find how to get involved and take one of those trainings so that you could deliver that information to your community.
Thank you. So many opportunities these days, and I hope some people will take you up on it. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We would really like to widen the circle of people who listen to or watch this podcast. So please, it would be great if you would take just a minute, copy the link of today's episode, post it on your Facebook or Instagram page, and encourage your friends to check it out. We hope these conversations get you thinking about ways you can faithfully resist, and the more who hear about them, the better. Also, press that subscribe button when you watch it on YouTube. And if you have ideas for people to interview, please zip us an email at faithfulresistance@jeffersonunitarian.org. And as we are wont to say when the music comes on, keep doing the next right thing. Go out and do the next right thing.